reminders about God's truth. And really here we're talking about reminders about God's truth as it relates to the human conscience, aren't we?
Well, not just as it relates to the human conscience, it's as it relates to all things. Because let's look at some basic attributes or qualities of God's truth. The first thing is it's absolute. In other words, it knows exactly what is true, and what is true is established, and there is only one truth. And that's the case with every aspect of our existence. If you drill down into it, there is only one truth, which can be expanded upon or simplified to a degree, but it is still one truth in terms of what we're explaining. So God's truth is absolute. That's one of its qualities or one of its attributes. God's truth's always emotional in that since truth opens our soul to love, it actually has an emotional effect on us. It impacts us emotionally. So if you're listening to truth and it's only having an intellectual impact on you, then you're not really receiving truth yet, right? When the truth really hits you, it hits you in your heart and it motivates you to act upon it. And that's one of the qualities of God's truth as well. So far it's absolute and it's emotional. We also see that God's truth, or any truth, can only be discovered if we have a passionate desire to receive it. So if you sort of a lackadaisical attitude, a laissez-faire type of attitude in life, then it's highly likely you're not going to receive much truth throughout your life. Although all of God's laws and principles are all designed to expose truth to you, it depends to a large degree on your desire to notice it as to whether you will notice it and then act upon it. So that's an important factor as well. There's also the factor that I feel that most people forget with truth, because we're so tied into this concept of, what would you call it? Most people on earth are scared of truth, are frightened of it. But truth is fascinating. There's no other word for it. It can fascinate and beguile us, in fact. And God's created it to do that, to draw us into its web, if you like, of information and knowledge. And God's created our soul in such a way that we have this passionate desire to engage it. And you see children doing that quite a lot. You know, why this and why that? Why daddy? Why mummy? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? And unfortunately, as parents, most parents tend to shut down the child from this kind of like fascinating discovery process. But truth is a fascinating discovery process. Every new truth, and God's designed truth to be this way, this fascinating process of discovery. And if you really engage the process of searching for God's truth, you'll always be fascinated and quite passionate about the process.
Okay.
Then it also promotes freedom, because if you think about it from a law perspective, if I know the law of gravity, then I don't have that as much freedom as if I know the law and I understand the law of aerodynamics as well as the law of gravity. Now that I understand the two laws and I understand the principles of aerodynamics, I can fly, which also helps me to overcome, to an extent, the law of gravity. So truth gives me more freedom. And it's always the case. The more you learn, the more free you become. The more easy your life becomes, and the more fascinating your life becomes, the more enjoyable it becomes, and you can do things faster as a result of truth. Truth is the cause of that. You know, knowing the truth is the cause of that. And then, of course, it expands our capacity to understand everything the truth does. So, and therefore, it expands our capacity to do everything, including to love. Without understanding truth and having an ever expanding capacity for truth, we would never have an ever expanding capacity for love. So truth is like, in a way, you could compare it or liken it to the doorway to love, the way to get to love. And so these are very fascinating aspects of truth that we need to bear in mind. Most people, when we talk about truth, they go, oh, no, not truth again. And that is an indication that there's some old injuries emotionally still existing within the soul, that preventing people from seeing this fascinating and beautiful aspect of truth, which is only there for our enjoyment in the end. Yeah.
So really what you just described is the truth from God's perspective. From God, this is how God sees truth. It's this wonderful doorway to things. It's fascinating. It's exciting. It promotes freedom. So, obviously, it's very important to our happiness, and God views it as something very important to our happiness.
Very much so.
So, it kind of makes sense then that God wants us to know it.
Of course. Now, if you think about that logically, you'd have to go, well, if God wants us to know it, then surely he's provided a mechanism via which we can know it. Some kind of truth receptor, if you like, inside of us that allows us to know and understand truth. And that receptor, as we'll find later on, is called our conscience. The human conscience is this receptor. It's like an antenna, you could say, almost, in tune with God's voice about all matters, not just our personal lives and not just our personal condition, but on all matters, everything universal and personal. So it includes everything. So it's very important to understand that God created a mechanism via which we can receive truth, even if we do not have a relationship with God.
Yeah, and so that's something that you've never really spoken about publicly before.
Not properly, no.
No. This idea that God has a way of giving us truth that is not about the reception of God's love, and it is not through observation, it's a direct line.
Yes. And if you think about it, it's a bit like a parent with a child that it doesn't yet have a relationship with, because the child has not yet developed love for the parent. The child is learning information from the parent. So the parent has a method of communicating truthful information, or unfortunately with the case of a parent, often untruthful information to the child. Now, God, it would make sense, God being a much greater parent, would have a method, have designed a method that would allow God to give communication to his children, all of his children, rather than children floundering around in the dark, as the saying goes. They would have the capacity to just go to the source of their life and go to the source of their soul, the person who created them, and say, what's this and what's that, and then get answers. And that's the mechanism of the soul.
And I suppose, though, similar to in that analogy where a child might be developing and they might not yet have the cognition or the developed brain enough to understand a very intricate answer, there's also a similarity in our relationship with reception of God's truth, isn't there?
That's correct.
In that we have to, we can receive some truth from God right now, but some truth we're only going to be open to receive and understand as different emotions leave us, and also as we've received some of God's love that sort of lays a new foundation for further truth.
Yes, and it might be even more correct to say that you can go through a gradual place of receiving more truth and base it on the foundation of previous truthful knowledge. So that's one way of receiving more truth. But if you continue that method only, you'll only progress to the sixth sphere of the spirit world. You can't progress beyond that point unless your soul changes inside. Now, what triggers the soul transformation from the perfect natural man into the divine is the reception of God's love. And the reception of God's love is necessary to understand every truth above the sixth dimension, or the sixth sphere of the spirit world. So we could say love does do things to the soul which causes the soul's potential capacity to grow in its ability to receive more truth, but the love itself doesn't cause the receiving of more truth. We still need to have this passionate desire for it and this desire to investigate it, but the love does transform the soul into a state where we're capable of understanding it. And this is the thing with a lot of God's truth. Unless you've received some of God's love, you are not capable of emotionally understanding the truth you're receiving. But before that time, God is obviously delivering to you the introductory foundation of truth, and he's always attempting to do that with all of his children.
Because it sort of seems to me that there's a kind of a dance that truth and love are doing in a way, in that more truth makes us more open to love, and then more love makes us open to more truth, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and it's probably not right to say the more love opens us to more truth. It is right to say that truth opens us to love. But it's probably not right to say that love opens us to truth. What love does is it transforms the soul into a new creature that's capable of absorbing different kinds, higher kinds of truth.
So it enables the reception of more truth. It
Yes.
still doesn't ensure it,
That's
because we
right.
must seek it.
That's right.
But it's sort of opening us to be able to receive a new level, to understand and comprehend a new level of truth.
Yes, and it also is very dependent on comprehension. Like a person who's intellectually seeking more truth will get to a point where their mind can not comprehend anything anymore of what's being offered. You know, it can still comprehend all of the past things that it's received, but the new things above the sixth sphere, the things pertaining to the soul-based actions of truth that we need to come to understand at some point in our future, the mind is not capable of understanding it without the soul being transformed. So and without the mind being absorbed by the soul in a lot of ways. Now, God's love transforms the soul into this new creature that allows the potential of new truth entering it, but it doesn't guarantee new truth will enter it.
Yes.
For new truth to enter it, there still has to be a desire, this other mechanism, this desire to connect to the mechanism God's provided for us to receive truth from God. And that mechanism is the conscience.
All right.